Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Christy and I'm so excited because today we're going to be kicking off yet another carnivore recipe relay. So this one, however, is a slightly edited version. So if you've seen, we've done two other relays, and if you've seen those, we have a meatloaf relay and we have an egg relay. And in those relays, the rules were that the first person, which was me, needed to do a recipe. Let's just go with meatloaf as the example. For a meatloaf, it was a fairly simple recipe. And then at the end of that video, I shouted out another carnivore YouTuber, and they made another version of that recipe using my identical recipe, but adding an ingredient. And then they shouted out another YouTuber who had to then add another ingredient, and so on. And so the relay was centered around one particular recipe. So for this relay though, we are switching it up and we're gonna center this recipe around just one carnivore ingredient. Because a lot of the comments that I get often are, well, isn't carnivore boring? Or when they're gonna start carnivore, they can't envision just eating a steak every day. Now that I'm 2 years in, I could totally eat a steak every day and not feel bored, but I definitely understand that when transitioning to a carnivore diet, it might not be something that people are ready to do. We'll make that something that's sustainable for them, right? And so I've been working on these different recipes, trying them out, and especially even for my son when he transitioned over. So I find that they're just very helpful in the transition, or occasionally when I just want something a little different. So you may be wondering, what carnivore ingredient are we going to be featuring today? You can probably see some ingredients over here, but only one of them is the featured ingredient, and that is this one. This is some breakfast sausage. It is pork breakfast sausage, and I will be making a recipe with this breakfast sausage. And stay tuned to the end of the video because that is where I will shout out the next YouTuber that will be responsible to create and make for you another carnivore recipe that must include this ingredient. Okay, we're gonna have 4 legs to this relay, so by the end of it, you're gonna have 4 solid recipes using a carnivore staple, pork breakfast sausage. But today, I'm not gonna be making a breakfast food, although I'm going to eat some for breakfast. But this is going to be a carnivore sausage soup. If you want to make this recipe exactly as I'm doing it, then you will need some breakfast sausage, and then you will need all the things you see over here. So I've got some eggs, I've got some Parmesan cheese, I've got some sour cream, I have some cream cheese, and I've got some heavy cream, and I'm also going to be putting in just some salt. So those are the things that I will be using. And as I make this, I will talk about modifications, things you could do differently, things you could add or take away, and still have a delicious recipe. So without any more talking, let's go ahead and get started and make this carnivore sausage soup. Alrighty, here you have a bird's eye view of my pan. I've got that on about a medium high heat. It's about a 6 on my burner. Now, what you could do if you choose is you could add a couple tablespoons of beef tallow or butter to this pan. I am not doing that because this sausage is actually more fat than it is protein. So in 1 4-ounce serving, there's 24 grams of fat and 18 grams of protein. So I find that enough fat is going to render off of this sausage that I'm not going to put any added fat in the pan. So here we go. Let's do this. Ah, the sizzle. The very next thing I'm going to do is use my wooden spoon here to break this sausage up. And while I'm doing that, I will tell you, this sausage is from Wild Pastures. I'm not affiliated with Wild Pastures in any way. It's just where I get my pasture-raised pork and chicken when I do that. It is not cheap, however. It is high quality. It is much better nutritionally as far as what you're going to be getting from this pasture-raised pork. But it is expensive. And as we know, hopefully we know, you can do a successful carnivore or keto diet even eating the cheaper meats. So what I will also use, I'll alternate back and forth with this higher quality sausage, is just the Great Value brand sausage from Walmart. And this is what that looks like if you're interested. The ingredients are almost exactly the same. So it does include pork, but of course it's conventionally raised pork. And then it just says spices, but I'm very sure one of the spices is sage because that's a pretty unmistakable one that you can smell. I don't know what the other spices might be, probably salt and pepper, but I don't know. And then there is sugar at the end of that ingredient list on the Great Value brand, whereas in this sausage that I'm using today, there is not sugar at all on the ingredients list. So to this sausage, I'm going to go ahead and add my favorite salt. This is Redmond Real Salt. I will link that below if you are interested in trying that out. And I'm going to use, I have a teaspoon measure, but it's about 3/4 of a teaspoon. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over and then cook that meat with that additional salt. Now, you guys, if this was just for me, I would probably use, instead of that, I would probably use this, which is my favorite Redmond smoked salt. It's the hickory smoked salt. Again, I'll link it below. The reason I'm not using that is because my son is probably going to eat the majority of this, or I'm hoping it's something he'll like, at least. And new flavors and things are challenging for him. And so we're going to keep the new flavors to a minimum. It's already enough that this is a new recipe. And so I'm just sticking to regular salt on that. I'm going to finish cooking this up. I'm not going to make you guys watch, but when this sausage is all browned up, I'll be back to show you what is the next step in this delicious carnivore sausage soup. Here we go. Now this sausage is definitely left in bigger chunks. I did that on purpose. I wanted some bigger pieces of sausage to enjoy in my soup. And because my son will be eating most of this, again, if you want a crispier sausage, feel free to cook it a little longer to get some more crispy parts. Some of this has browned up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that as I flip it over, but my son tends to like a smoother texture on things. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave it this way. Now, it depends on your presentation. I don't care so much about presentation, so I'm going to leave all that delicious pork fat in the pan with the soup. And if you don't care about presentation, I recommend doing that as well because this fat is very good for you, but it will tend to rise to the top and make like a fatty layer on top of that soup. So now is time for the bone broth. And you guys, I'm 100% convinced that making my own broth is the healthiest way to do it, and I've done that, but I make it from my ribeye bones, and the ribeyes have not been on sale, so I have no ribeye bones. I'll be using 4 cups of this Kettle and Fire grass-fed beef bone broth, and so that's what I'm going to put in here now. And if you take the time, or you want to take the time, or you want the crispier sausage, then what you would do then is deglaze the pan with this bone broth. There we go. 4 cups in the pan here. I'm just going to give that a stir. And then what I'm going to do is just bring this back up to a boil. So again, a watch pot never boils. Therefore, through the magic of YouTube, I will be right back and show you what to do next. Here is that broth. As you can see, it's come up to a nice boil. And I'm just going to let that keep on going while I work on the next addition for this soup. All right, so here in this bowl, I have some egg yolks, and I messed up one of them. My intention was 2 egg yolks. This is more like 2.5 egg yolks because I messed one of them up. There's probably a little bit of white right there from my mistake, but I wanted to save as much of the egg yolk that I messed up as possible. So this is a step that you could do for this soup, even if you don't do dairy, right? So far I've got the sausage and I've got the bone broth. And again, that's an optional beef tallow or butter. So if you'd used beef tallow, the meat and the broth, and then this step here you could do as a non-dairy carnivore. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my egg yolks and just with a little fork, I'm just going to kind of, mix those together so it makes a liquid like this. Here I am back at the pot. Here are those eggs, and what I'm going to do is just with a small spoon, I'm going to take a little bit of that broth, just a little bit, and I'm going to add that into my yolks and kind of stir it. So this is a process called tempering, and so I'm just going to keep doing that. So I'm going to take a little bit more of that broth, Add it to the yolk here. And this time I'm going to be smart and kind of stir it with my fork. Okay, and then I'm just going to keep doing that process till those egg yolks are what we call tempered. And that way we're not cooking them into scrambled eggs. I'm going to slowly pour this in, back into the soup. I just want to see if I'm getting any scrambled eggs. It doesn't look like I am. And I know you might not be able to see that from your vantage point there. I think this is working, you guys. I'll show it to you in a minute. I know I'm probably blocking the view, but you can see that. See how the broth is totally lightened in color, but you don't see chunks of egg in there. Wow. I can't believe how light that got. Look at that. It looks like there's cream in there, but there isn't any. That is so cool. If you are dairy-free, then you would basically stop right here and you would turn off the fire and you would dish this up and you would eat it and it would be delicious. But my son eats a lot more dairy than I am. In fact, I would be willing to try it just like this. It looks so good. But my son eats more dairy than I do. I include more dairy in his diet. So I'm going to show you the dairy version. We just keep on going with that. So the next ingredient for the dairy-filled version is heavy cream. I buy this kind from Clover because it has one ingredient, which is cream. So there's no carrageenan, there's no gums or fillers or anything like that. So this is my favorite one also because it's a little extra fatty. Notice it does have 6 grams of fat per tablespoon. The other ones tend to have 5. And I'm going to just leave the fire going, although I'm going to turn it down a little bit from a 6 to a 4. Reduce that boil a little bit. But I'm going to add about a cup. Now, you're not going to see me pull out a measuring cup because I don't tend to measure. But about a cup or so of this heavy cream, I'm going to add this slowly to what I've got going on here and stir it as I do it. So we will add that heavy cream. Okay, right about there. Okay, and you can see how that's lightened up even more and gotten even more creamy. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is just let this come back up to a simmer because putting in the cold cream has taken the boil away. So I'm going to let that come back up to a simmer and kind of all cook together before I add the next ingredient. Okay, we have come back up to a boil and it's time for the next ingredient. This is 4 ounces of cream cheese. And as you can see, I've sliced it up. It just melts a little more easily when it's sliced up like this. So I'm just going to drop these cream cheese chunks right into the pot. And they were, I don't know, maybe halfway to room temperature. So if you're curious, like I didn't get them all the way to room temperature for sure. They were sitting on my counter for a little while as I was cooking the soup. That's about the extent of the chance that they had to get to room temperature. So as you can see, it doesn't take too long. It starts to get melty and kind of combine. Cream cheese is fully incorporated. The next step is actually to turn off that flame and then wait for the boiling to stop. The next 2 ingredients that I'm going to add, you want them to kind of melt in, but the soup will get a strange sort of consistency if you add either one of them while it is boiling. So you want it to be hot, but not boiling. I grated up about a half a cup or so of this Parmesan cheese. Yeah, cheese to taste, guys. What if you want to add cheese, not add cheese, but this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to kind of sprinkle in all around some of that cheese and then go ahead and stir. And then I'm just going to repeat that process until the cheese is gone. So I'm just basically going to take my spoon here and get a good sized chunk of sour cream, about a 1/4 cup worth, just by eye, and scoop that in. And then the heat of the soup should let that sour cream sort of melt and combine into the mixture here. And you guys, that is it. Once that sour cream is incorporated, that is it for this recipe. I'm going to scoop some of this in a bowl give it a try and let you know how I like it. That was totally fun and easy to do. I don't know if you can see. I don't want to spill my soup, but here's my bowl of sausage soup. First thing I'm going to do is give this a taste, and then I'm going to call out the next YouTuber so that she can move ahead in this relay, and we'll find out what leg 2 of this relay will look like. Want to make sure to get a chunk of sausage in there. That is so good. The sausage flavor is definitely in the forefront. So it's you get that sausage flavor right away. So if you like breakfast sausage, just the flavor of that, then this recipe is for you. And then after you kind of get that sausage, then the creaminess and the broth and all of that comes through as a more subtle flavor at the end. So I highly recommend this. I will be, when I'm done talking to you guys, I'll be finishing that. That'll be my breakfast today. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm going to be calling out the next YouTuber in this relay. Again, the rules are you must use breakfast sausage and come up with a recipe that is unique, and that is not carnivore soup. So I can hardly wait to see what you are going to do. Robin Heron, that is right, everyone, your carnivorous grandma. Robin, please take this baton from me and make us a breakfast sausage recipe that we can all enjoy. But for now, there's only one thing for me to go and do, and that is Meet Some Wellness, one bowl of carnivore sausage soup at a time.